Monster. My name is Dave, and I'll be one of your hosts for the episode. We have joining us today from across the world, the second most international podcast, right?
Cool. Sounds about right.
So we have Cameron and Matt.
Yep. Hi, I'm Cameron. I'm
Hello.
our Australian division.
And I am Matt from Britain, or Britain, as it's otherwise known, or United Kingdom. Take your pick.
For however long, yeah.
Indeed, for however long. Okay, today we're going to be taking a look at Kaiju for one of probably a few episodes. The first film we'll be looking at is Pacific Rim, which came out in... Oh, I didn't look that up, did I?
2013, I think.
Yes, 2013.
Yeah.
And it was directed by Guillermo del Toro, and wasn't his first foray into the monster films, but the first with giant monsters.
Yep.
And the movie itself, it's just pretty straightforward. It's set in the year 2020, at least for the prologue. The Kaiju arrived 7 years prior to the beginning of the movie and basically suddenly started rampaging.
Quite a unique one, actually, in that sense, from, the whole Pacific and breach situation. I think it's, compared to other movies, because obviously I think a lot of people know it as a robots versus monsters sort of film, but I think, even the subtle difference having the breach in there is actually quite a nice little thing to have, in the sense that, it's not somewhere you would expect them to come from, especially the fact that they're not just traditional sea monsters. I think the fact that they actually come from, in the break in the, between the plates and such, like under the Pacific, is actually quite a unique thing, which sort of gives it a bit more depth than just big robots versus big monsters.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's an alien movie, isn't it? Really? Yeah, no, it's an alien movie. I mean, you find out at the end, spoilers, that was it another dimension, another planet? It was a bit
another dimension. It seemed to be, and we should probably spoiler warning for the movies we're talking about.
Oh my god, yeah!
If you haven't seen them, we're going to spoil them.
Aww.
Maybe we should throw that at the front of the episode.
Probably should have. We'll live and learn.
But yeah, no, it's a nice take on kaiju as opposed to the classic "a monster rises from the deep after the disturbances of man" trope that you sort of started with Godzilla. We'll get to later, I guess.
Yeah, and then it's really because of the disturbances of man that they're able to do what they're doing. So it's the movie has fairly an environmental message saying that our climate change and pollution's what, as one of the characters says, terraforms Earth for these these giant beasts.
Yes, yeah.
I think as well, from a filming point of view, it also gives you, or it gives Del Toro and anyone that was involved with it, that they can actually have whatever they want coming through from a kaiju point of view. Ultimately, the fact that rather than just being one central monster, you can, if you're saying, well, it's aliens throwing it down, sending it through a portal under the Pacific. Yeah, throw them down. Here's, we'll have a big horned one. We'll have one with blades on top. You can have, you from a creativity point of view, you can have whatever you want out of it, which I think sort of they took advantage of in the end.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, the sheer variety of these kaiju is pretty much astounding. I mean, every single one of them was a spectacle.
Yeah, I've got the some development notes up here, and there are 9 kaiju designed just for the film, but about 40 were apparently designed in the process of picking those 9. art just to make this already large variety of monsters small enough for a movie.
Or large enough for a couple sequels.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, that's the thing as well. You can imagine it from a designer point of view. You can imagine being an artist or such, like they said, just literally just draw 50 monsters. If that was your sort of forte and what you had an interest in, that would be amazing to get to do that. If you're an artist, say just draw 50 monsters. Can you imagine that? I'm not an artist, but that would give me goosebumps if I had that. You could literally let your creative flow go on that, couldn't you? Which again, I think they did to a degree.
Oh, I mean, certainly. If you just Del Toro himself does a lot of the creature designs in most of his movies.
Yeah,
and he has his certain touch, the way that the eyes and the faces generally look. So I think he just went free reign. I was like, I'm gonna do 50 different monsters, and it'll be great, and maybe I'll use all of them.
Oh,
Who
yeah.
knows?
Oh, there's a kaiju in the back, in there. Background.
Yes. It's a dog-shaped one.
Dear God.
That's how they get to us. That's where it all starts.
That's a different monster
no,
movie.
I can see that.
Howling, that's the 10th anniversary episode, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's John Carpenter's Kaiju.
That'll probably be on our sci-fi channel in the UK, because like I said, they love the. I mean, you probably get it in your country. Mecha, whatever. Scissor shark versus lizard head times 10. Oh, it's that'll be it. John Carpenter's Kaiju. You've heard it here first.
Exactly. I would watch that. I'd
Oh,
watch
yeah.
it for just the music.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So when we're looking at this, it's not just the kaiju. They're pretty much framed not really against humanity, but against the Jaegers, these giant behemoths that people built because that was the only thing that was going to withstand basically these, natural disaster style events.
Man, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it gives me hope for humanity that the idea that destroying the world, what's our first instinct? We build
robots.
A giant robot.
It is nice, isn't it?
To fight the monster. Hand to hand. Like there's got to be like 10 cameras on any one of these fights, right? They're selling these as documentaries, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. It's given us a little insight to the future, isn't it? Because let's be honest, in most other films and media, they're always nuking, aren't they? Oh, let's what's new monster? Oh, let's nuke it. And and obviously you can imagine someone in the background's going, whoa, take your finger off that button. I've got an idea. Let's build robots, not just robots, giant robots. And it's like
showed me his Voltron. Showed me his Voltron Mini this morning. He was very proud of it. I thought, no, that'll work though.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
Oh,
good on him. Well done, humans. Good job.
Oh yeah. Yeah, but Dave, as you were going on with the Jaegers, sort of as the antithesis to our kaiju.
I mean that they're basically the only thing that there's a bit of dialogue, I believe, in the opening part of the film where our main hero, he's Raleigh Beckett. He's in his Jaeger, and he's kind of doing this soliloquy saying that these kaiju are forces of nature, but when I'm riding or piloting my Jaeger, I feel like I could fight a hurricane. So they're taking that comparison almost literally, which I think is just really interesting.
Oh yeah, no, it certainly frames the battle pretty intensely.
I think also as well is it sort of highlights that for once in these sort of types of films where there is a threat to humanity, it almost feels like that humans aren't always on the back foot. Is obviously in every other film, whether it's aliens or anything like that, humanity always feels like they're having to, make up the gap, because they're getting, they're being attacked and they're having to find a solution. Where is that it feels like no, we're on a level playing field here. We've got our Jaegers, we've got the force to to take them on for once, and actually, and if not, we'll make a better robot, a bigger robot. It's sort of it's and I think in a way it actually highlights sort of the way humanity works in that regard, because obviously as a race we do want to progress and evolve, because that's what we naturally do, century by century, and it's the next level of that. Whereas obviously at this moment we're not building robots of that size, or are we? But we're and and the fact that one day that I in a weird way, even though I'm not saying we're going to get attacked by kaiju, I could see us doing that as a race. Doing that. Yeah. No, we'll build robots to take them on, and we will we'll take it to them. So I think it's evolution.
Well, I mean, it's a cultural touchstone at this point. It's like a trope. I don't think we would think of something else instead. Everyone would be like, okay, no, we need to build a giant robot. That's what we do, right?
Well, no, it'd be more like, well, finally, we get to build the giant robot.
Or use the one we built. I don't know.
Finally.
That Gundam has been moving around Japan.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sure the Japanese just have them everywhere. In plain sight.
Well, it'll be like Transformers, wouldn't it? First Transformer movies where they're all hidden, aren't they? Decepticons are hidden, like, oh, that van over there is actually, a Transformer. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe all those vending machines in Japan are actually Jaegers. Maybe.
Oh god.
They do have a lot of vending machines.
They rely on them, and you can imagine that, that vending machines over there are very, a big part of their life over there, or reliance on it. Could be Jaeger, it could be Jaegers under there.
Jaeger material.
Just saying.
And just now we have switched our category from educational entertainment to conspiracy.
Yeah.
Jaegers everywhere.
Sorry, Japan, I'm not saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got giant monsters, giant robots. Pretty good basis for a movie.
Yeah, you think they would have made a couple of these, right?
You would think it'd take him less than 4 years to come up with a sequel. Still waiting.
Yeah, I think it's
out there somewhere.
Probably budgetary concerns.
Oh yeah.
They just watching the making of for the film. Del Toro, I mean, he built those Jaeger cockpits where they were walking in them.
So they were full sets.
So that's a lot of the money just goes into like you do the Jaeger, or not the Jaegers and the Kaiju are CG. They may have had a few practical effects, but I think just because of that, melding that with the practical sets and having the water splash and all that kind of thing, that gives it that a little bit more staying power, a little bit more like Jurassic Park.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Also, can we just talk for a second? Okay, I'll go, I guess.
Keep going.
Can we talk? Can we talk just for a second? These Jaegers, any way we could have chosen, and yet we chose to play Dance Dance Revolution with a partner to pilot a giant robot. Because when
surely,
they're them,
surely that's the base of everything.
Dance Dance Revolution is.
Yeah.
This is I do remember the first time I saw the film, just that first shot of them Raleigh and his brother both piloting their Jaeger, and it's very cool, don't get me wrong, but at the same time it's these two guys making jogging motions inside this giant head.
Yeah, it was.
Well, you never know that they may have wanted the Power Rangers way of doing it. Just being all of them set around in a in the head like that, and just just waving their arms around. But they obviously realised that it's been done before, so they thought, let's mix it up.
Yeah, I thought that part was. I mean, they go on about how they when they're drifting, one's controlling the right hemisphere and one controlling the left hemisphere, but they're not controlling the respective left and right halves of the Jaeger. They're doing the whole thing simultaneously.
Yeah, something like that. It's a bit more complex, I guess. I mean, the same as the human brain, I suppose, but so
yeah, I think so. There's the I think it's the Crimson Dynamo, the Hong Kong Jaeger with the triplet brothers.
This is a fan favorite.
Yeah, everyone loves that one.
And so each brother controls an arm, is what it sounds like, but that's not what it looks like in practice. Like they all just controlled all three arms.
It's not the most well explained at doing a giant mecha.
Well, I think I mean, in comparison to other series where they might just be holding a control stick if you're lucky, they went into it quite a bit, but I don't think it holds to too much scrutiny.
Much about it.
But I think as well with the what you're saying about not using control sticks and and instead they when they punch the Jaeger punches, I think as well I think that also adds to the spectacle of it as well, because let's be honest, when you watch these sort of films, when the Jaeger is taking on the kaiju, you as a person watching it, you almost want to be behind the punch that's hitting there's that part of you going, go on, hit him, and it's almost like, I think it's that side, again, bringing a bit more of a human side into it rather than just hitting a switch or, moving a joystick around. They're actually, the user is actually, making the punch and, almost, as an audience member, I think you feel it a bit more as well, on that sort of level anyway. I think that was deliberate potentially.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it makes the scenes more dynamic. If you look at older shows or anyone where someone's just sitting in a cockpit, you got their head and you see their hands maybe. In this, you have a full body shot. They're like running in place, but it's giving that sense of like action to every part of the film.
Yeah, definitely.
So, well, I guess we'll go back to the kaiju there.
Yeah. We can't help ourselves, can we? We can't help it, can we?
It's the robot show, huh?
Everything's so cool. Come on. Robot, dear robot. Let's do it.
No, actually, what I was going to say, leading on to what you said earlier, that I think I read that Del Toro wanted the kaiju to be in, the actors playing them to be in suits, to mirror the old school, Godzilla films and the like, etc. To actually, rather than it being all CGI, I think he originally wanted that, if they can be in a suit, they can. Whereas I don't think it happened, obviously, in the end. But that was actually his original wish to sort of stay, consistent with the films of decades ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he did similar suit things with Hellboy and a few of his other movies, where some of the monsters were actors in suits, so it's doable. But I think maybe the scale he was working with, or just they were quadruped most of the time. I think that may have made it more difficult.
And obviously, Andy Serkis was, from Gollum, was probably busy, because again, he's probably the only person they could.
Oh yeah, definitely.
He's all for it.
That's all you can call it. Yeah.
His schedule was full. Can't do it. We can't do the live action, guys. We gotta make him CG.
He's doing the Dark Souls 3 DLC. Anyway. Yeah. So back onto the kaiju.
Yep, we'll get there.
I believe we'll get there.
We're working at it. We're getting warmed up.
Oh yeah.
So, another pretty interesting aspect of the kaiju, giving to that theme of pollution, is that there's that their blood is not only acidic but just harmful on a general level. It's enough that they gave it a term of that kaiju blue.
Kaiju blue, yeah. Apparently it's ammonia based, which would be pretty nasty. Trust me. Done enough work with that, so.
Yeah, I think they talk about that a little bit. What is it? Hannibal Chow's character, the black market marketeer.
Yeah. Ron Perlman.
Yeah, good old Ron Perlman. He goes on saying that the brain's it's too full of ammonia. We can't use it.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's a market around this these kaiju. Another theme that's just really prevalent in the film is that commercialism. They're marketing Jaegers as these spectacles, and they're kind of giving in that team specific colors.
They're superheroes.
But
like they are worshipped. They get
branding,
highly advertised. Yeah.
I also think it shows how it's become a part of life as well. That because obviously in these other sort of films, it's usually scientists that are involved with wanting to take parts and do the research. Where it shows how long that humans have got used to kaiju coming through the breach. That they've actually now established because black markets don't just come out aren't a 5-minute thing. So the fact that shows how long they've got used to it, and now they've, like I said, they've turned it into a commercial thing. Is crazy when you think about it. But like I said, it adds a bit of a new dynamic to it as well, and it's
certainly it certainly adds to the feel of it being sort of a realistic world as well. Because of course, if giant monsters appeared, people would be grinding them down for parts and traditional medicine and whatnot. And this is what we see in the film, obviously, as well.
Yeah, and it gives a couple dates. So the end of the film, when we're in the present of the film, it's 12 years after the initial kaiju appearance. So in the scheme of things, that's a long time to be suffering these monthly and shorter duration attacks. So I mean, obviously, people will have built they're building their lives around this, and inland seems safer, but they're erecting these giant wall barriers on the coasts to ostensibly protect the mainland.
At the end of 2024, there were 46 confirmed kaiju attacks in the Pacific Rim universe, which is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the Jaeger pilots themselves make a big deal about, I have 10 confirmed kills or 10 encounters, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you realize how destructive the kaiju are, and even just toward the end, these are seasoned pilots with these experience under their belts, and just getting whipped,
getting destroyed by some of the later kaiju.
Yeah, just because of the category level that they've assigned these kaiju events.
I think the numbers actually sort of get a bit lost in the sense of things, because if you compare to the other films like the ones we're about to move on to a bit later, where it's one monster, one kaiju that is causing all this destruction, and you think when they're talking, there's been 48 of them, there's been 10 here, they've killed 12 over here. That's crazy numbers. To think that one kaiju or monster could cause so much havoc in one part of the world, if not the world, and they're sort of I know they're deliberately not, but they're almost trivializing the numbers of them. The fact that the numbers mean little really in the end, and it's quite and again that's a real contrast to all the other films that that are similar to this, again, that we're going to cover later.
During the film, honestly, they all feel like they could have had their own film as a feature monster.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, each of them are iconic enough, but to speak to that trivialization, they 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 hammer it home on the initial kaiju, the first kaiju that made landfall. According to
Yeah.
the film, it was a 6-day battle because, of course, there were no Jaegers. It was just the standing army, and over a 35-mile pitched fight. They finally stopped it. But when you see throughout the film, they're like, oh, they defeated 3 kaiju in an hour, or they don't go into exactly how long it takes, but they did downgrade the severity of the kaiju while upgrading their category.
Yeah.
They're like, you couldn't beat a category 1, in 6 days, but you beat a category 4 in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there's the upgrade of Jaegers, which have gotten better over time as well, being a big part of how the different categories are sort of almost trivialized as they get higher. Yeah, you're right. Pardon me. It's like, a category 1 is nothing if you've got a seasoned Jaeger pilot, but if all you are is the standing National Guard of the US or something, and a 200-foot, 40,000-ton thing just crawls out of the ocean and starts walking towards San Francisco, what are you going to do?
Yeah, you're gonna take 6 days to try to.
You can take 6 days to kill it
and take it. Yeah. The thing is, it almost makes it a bit gamified, really, doesn't it? It's sort of the fact it makes it feel like like when you're playing a beat 'em up or something, and they're sort of progressively getting harder. Like, that there's, it'll just stand there and get beaten, and then, like I said, you go to the next level. That's what you feel like the aliens are doing when they're sending new ones down. Like, okay, level 10, here you go. So, this is the sort of thing it feels like they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think another a point to that is if the aliens, or the controllers, or whatever, are sending these kaiju through, and they're creating them, you get that. Why didn't they just send the category 5 from the get-go? It would have been over.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, nothing.
Because then there wouldn't be a film.
You have to fight to that. But just in world, I mean, when they're developing it, there's that kind of idea. What are they doing with that? Why is it taking 12 years? So
yeah, I mean,
obviously can't. I mean, they're mass producing them according to when you're seeing the memories that good old Newt is drifting with the kaiju to acquire, and it looks like these giant factories, for lack of a better term, but maybe there's a gestation period or something, so we don't get more than a cursory glance at the kaiju like physiology.
Yeah. I mean, getting the short version of it, especially when we get the scene when Newt looks into the memories of a kaiju, basically, but you're not seeing the 5 to 6 years it takes just to grow something that big before they can start sending them out or anything like that.
And I think that was another thing about the drift is they can only convey it visually through the film, but they're getting more information through that experience as characters in the movie. Like Newt, we don't know how long that his connection lasted. It was short, but he seemed to pull a lot more from that than just what we were able to see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
there's only so much you can do with a purely visual and audio, a touch or smell or memories or anything like that on what you can just show on the screen. So
the thing is, they could have really gone to town with the whole origin thing of how the kaiju, where they come from. Because let's be honest, with the whole controllers, aliens side of things, you don't see that much of it, really. They don't really give you that much insight to how they how they breed, make them or breed them, or however they come. It's you're getting sort of tidbits of information. And I think, in a sense, they could have made almost a whole other movie on that side of things. But I suppose, to be fair, if they spent a lot of time on that, then it would taken away from the visual, epic side of the films as well. So I think, and also I think it going on from what you're saying about why they didn't send level 5s down straight away. Again, it's probably an evolution thing as well. Again, it shows that straight away, humans were slightly on the back foot, but then managed to start building Jaegers, and then obviously, like I said, Jaegers have got better, Kaiju are getting better, and it's just it's just a natural evolution. There's a war, it's almost like a war situation where as time, the tactics get better, your enemy a bit better, you get better, they get better, and and then obviously it eventually finalizes. So I think that's sort of probably where they came from as well.
That and probably that idea of escalation. I mean, we can see in the film that the other dimension, their time scale is utterly different. If they're going at this from the age of the dinosaurs, then kind of taking a break, waiting for a bit, and then coming back,
millions of years
later. I don't think that they had a sense of urgency until we get Newt do his interface, and there's that two-way street of the drift connection, seeing that they're planning to do a very specific nuclear attack on the rift,
whatever they are. Yeah.
So I think at that point they're like, oh, we'll escalate things, bump the timetable up a little bit. So then you get those, 2 events, the 3 events, that escalating emergence of Kaiju.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it almost seems like, say there's a specific gestation period and they were kind of just buffering it, and where before they were just releasing 1 or 2, maybe those were like test ones that to make sure they survived in the atmosphere. But when they kind of got that down to a T, they're like, well, this works. We got our, giant backlog of 100 or however many they're going to send, and just kind of start lumping, tossing them out.
Shipping them out.
So I think that'll be interesting if this Pacific Rim 2, gets off the ground, to see if they're gonna go with the same kaiju, or if it's going to be like a different dimension or a different source, or it woke up in from a volcano or something.
Yeah, definitely.
The thing is, it could be as simple as another breach, but they'll just put another hole, comes in the middle of the Pacific, they'll close one off and then another one comes out. It could be as simple as that. I suppose it depends how creative they want to be with it, I suppose. But yeah, I think they got a lot of potential in the the next film, whatever they do with it. But yeah, fingers crossed.
So taking a look at the kaiju, did you guys have any particular favorites? Or any ones that stood out design wise?
My absolute favorite in the film is the one we see in the sort of the prologue, which is Knifehead. Initial one in the prologue that goes off with Gypsy Danger and our protagonist Raleigh. Raleigh? I never know how to pronounce his name, but it's called Knifehead because it has this long. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a goblin shark, but this sort of shark-like mouth and this long protruding nose that it uses as a weapon by sort of repeatedly trying to pierce the Jaeger with it. And I just think it's a really cool, really sort of iconic design, stands out immediately.
Yeah, that one was pretty interesting. You get that it's really visceral attacks. In just past kaiju movies, they're stand up, take a couple slugs at each other, but this is it's really grappling, and as the movie goes on, of course, we see the Jaegers do a little bit more
kind of thing. Yeah.
Intricate fights. Matt, what was your?
To me, I think they're better. Well, I don't know what I would consider my favorite one, but I just think that I like the. I mean, is it Slattern? I think that's the one they call it. The one that's got the like a
the
big
very
tail
final...
on it. It's I just think it's like I like that one because I think for me I like whether it's kaiju or any monster, I like when they're quite aggressive as well. Because some can be a monster but a bit of a pushover. Whereas I think ones where they can, like you see in other films that we're about to talk about, where something almost sort of like an octopus or something with multiple arms or something, where it can actually almost like squeeze the protagonist or which whatever monster or Jaeger you're talking about. I think anything that can sort of really sort of crush them and sort of almost give them a bear hug, or any sort of creature like that, I think is always is the sort of thing I like, because I think in a way it makes them threatening. I know that's you can say that for any of them, but I think there's something quite scary about those things, where it's not just blades or claws or anything like that. Anything that can sort of do that sort of thing, I think is fantastic. I think, but like we said earlier on, I think the range of them is great as well. I think they really did well with the with all the variations of them. The Slattern, I think it's the knife head is the one you're talking about, and the leather back. They're all a real good selection. To be fair, I think they and again, with any future films, they can really go to town with them. Let's see what they do.
Yeah. Personally, it might be the same one. It has the prehensile tail, but it's the only kaiju that flies. But that is a surprise.
I think that's Otachi. That is Otachi. Yeah.
Otachi. Yeah.
One of the category 4s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that whole fight, I mean, it was great. It moves from sea to land to air.
That is fantastic. Yeah. Gets the glory of taking out the beloved Hong Kong Jaeger with 0 effort.
Yeah.
that was a bit of an anticlimax, but
well, they took pains to show the Hong Kong Jaeger. It dices up one.
Yeah.
Does his the Thunder Typhoon, or I don't recall the particular special move. And they're kind of showing the brothers, be somewhat competent, and then to give a more sense of just the power of that particular kaiju, it just easily dispenses with these seasoned veterans, and gives our Gypsy Danger a run for its money.
Yeah. I for me, it's, even though it's quite a basic thing, I love the design. If you look at if you got the tail in front of you, it's like a 3-clawed sort of situation going on. It's again, it's simple. It just really does feel like whoever designed it, it's got the quite a classic front with the sort of the horn that's going backwards and the rest of it, but quite dinosaur like. But it's just that little claw at the end. I think it just separates it from something quite generic. But it's very well designed.
Yeah, it definitely stands out among all the other ones as well. Like Dave said, it's the only one that can, as far as we know, at least fly, and goes way up as well. Like, it looks like a low orbit in the film almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were losing atmosphere, so it had to be like low Earth orbit. And the fact that they were like had enough friction to start burning up on re-entry.
Exactly, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, but even that same kaiju, it's so many specific parts. There's the prehensile tail. There's its strange flower mouth tongue thing. It's like fucking acid.
Like it's got an acidic uvula, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Little flower bits.
And it also
sorry.
Yeah, no, it also gives birth as well to once the Black Marketeers we mentioned earlier start, it actually births this sort of fetal version of itself, which is pretty creepy, to be honest. that thing always creeps me out every time I watch the film.
It does have some
It
particularly
also
googly eyes.
Yeah,
I was going to say as well, the mouth of it also is sort of a bit like similar to, well, sort of similar to the things in Resident Evil, isn't it? Some, like where the mouth, the lips open out and such, like at the bottom. It's when it's sort of it's got a bit of design off that really, or similar to the face huggers off Alien as well. It's sort of it's got an element of it anyway, where it's sort of the lips open up and all the mouth, it's good design.
Yeah, I think Del Toro he leans on that sometimes. I believe he directed Blade 2, and the vampires in that had that same their jaw opened up and split and had that extra mouth.
Yeah, it did actually.
Unnerving.
Pretty unnerving.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
No one's going to disagree on that, I think.
It's something. Let's be honest. It's not something you'd like to experience while you're having your dinner. Let's keep it as simple as that.
Yeah. So those are our personal favorites among the kaiju of the film, but there are a lot of others as well.
Yeah.
I think Matt, you might have mentioned Leatherback as well, the sort of the gorilla style kaiju.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really important because he's the first instance of the kaiju really getting super adapted to deal with Jaegers, because he has an EMP, doesn't he, on his back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. That sounds familiar to another monster.
Well, we'll be getting to that later. But But yeah, no, like again, this is stuff where each kaiju sort of stands out on its own. You've got Otachi flying around, you've got big knife head, and then you've got things like Leatherback, where he walks onto the field and just completely shuts down the Jaeger striker Eureka by just shutting off all its systems with an electromagnetic pulse, which is pretty cool, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. It shows that they've taken inspiration from a lot, conventional creatures, which I suppose they have to really, because they've got it somewhere. But even though it sounds quite an obvious that to use a gorilla monster, again, not heard of one of those before, but it's but again, even though it's using something quite that's been done before in that sense, it still works. You don't go, it's not another gorilla monster. So it's still unique. And I think again that that shows how well they did with the design on these things. There was actual purpose behind them, rather than just choosing one.
Into it with the animation as well for the fights, because Leatherback is just all over the place. He's sort of grappling with Jaegers and going up and over them and under them and everything. It's sort of, honestly, it's like a fight from King Kong, but that's for later. He really gets sort of more unique feeling fights. Everyone else is just punching and kicking, and he's doing grapples and locks and everything, almost like a trained boxer.
Yeah. And again, it's sort of similar how a gorilla could fight in that sort of situation, based it on that as well, and it sort of and again, it creates unique kaiju, it creates unique fights, against unique Jaegers. It's that's why it performs so well overall as a piece, is as a spectacle. It's just having these sort of combinations where you can have whatever Jaegers you want, having kaiju that have got all these different traits, and it's almost like they matched them up effectively. You could imagine that at one point, when they were creating it, that Del Toro and his team were going, right, okay, we'll put this kaiju against these Jaegers, and you world's your oyster with it really, and it's paid off.
Yeah.
And I think that's also that particular fight was the first instance, well, aside from the opening, where we get a direct comparison of Kaiju versus Jaeger, but then also Kaiju versus Pilot, and you see the magnitude, because when they're framed against the Jaeger, they're the same size as a person, basically.
Yeah.
But then you get the two the Striker Eureka pilots climbing out and armed with nothing but flare guns, facing down this this giant kaiju.
Honestly, I felt a swell of pride as an Australian citizen. Of course, the Aussie can't do that, but no, it is a fantastic moment. Yeah.
Actually, I think one of the actors is British, isn't it? One of the Aussie pilots. I think the son. I think he's British, isn't he? I think.
I'm pretty sure he is. His accent wasn't amazing, but it wasn't off either. So
he did change the way he said "rally" like 3 or 4 times.
Rally.
But I think that's also on purpose. He was just mocking him. Rally.
Oh man.
That's the only way I remember the main guy's name. He kept mocking him.
Oh yeah, it's a good way to make sure we actually remember.
Well, they don't mention it they're calling everybody basically by their last name for most of it, since it's sort of a military operation.
Oh no, I couldn't tell you anyone's name off the top of my head, really, unfortunately. But you remember the Jaegers and you remember the Kaiju, which honestly are the important parts of the film.
Yeah, it's this is contrasted basically against disaster movies, because that's kind of what a lot of monster movies, these kaiju films, are. I mean, this, you can compare it to Twister, or any of the other large blockbuster disaster films, where people, there's this event happening and all they can pretty much do is run and hide. So with these the kaiju films, at least specifically the ones that have mecha or other robots in them, there's some sort of agency where man can fight back, against something otherwise that they're powerless against. And of course that works to only varying degrees of success there.
Yeah. No, it's a very literal representation of human ingenuity to overcome the forces of nature, as we sort of started out with the kaiju being a sort of a style thing in this movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're literally classified the same way hurricanes are. So they weren't trying to be subtle with that.
No, not at all.
and also, I think in using the various nationalities as well was obviously, show a collective human, front against the kaijus as well, and obviously trying to make them as varied as they can. So, obviously they've used a bit of stereotypes in there as well, but I don't think it overshadows it. I think it makes sense, because it's what we should do when we do get attacked by kaiju.
Oh yeah. Everyone band together.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're doing on this podcast right now.
Exactly. Yeah. But no, it makes sense using the film as a comparison to any kind of natural disaster, or as the case may be, more toward climate change. I mean, that's not a phenomenon that affects one specific area or one specific nation. It's a global threat or issue. Exactly. So showing that people can successfully band together to deal with something that's a core message of the film.
I honestly hope so, because look, 85% of Australia lives within about 20 miles of the coast, so climate change is a big thing for us.
All right, do we have anything else to go over? I think we kind of covered maybe what we wanted to talk about for.
That's not our favorite kaiju.
I think so.
Yeah, I think we've done pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot more kaiju than we covered, obviously, but these are the ones that sort of stood out to us. You're welcome, of course, to.
I think it's trying to get away from not talking about the Jaegers.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh
we
god,
could go on a
They're
little
the-
bit more about those guys, but I think that's within the wheelhouse of the podcast, and yet not the focus.
no,
oh,
fair point.
So
but Shadow Alpha's
let's
just
turn
so
to our
good.
next film. We'll take a look at Godzilla. This was directed
Godzilla.
by Mr. Gareth Edwards, and
Yep.
again, a spectacle of a film.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd say this is perhaps closer to the traditional disaster movies. It's got a lot more people and a lot less monster in it, but still.
Hmm.
Well, and the director himself, he hews pretty close to the traditional Godzilla film mold. We get a 2 hour long movie with the brunt of the action and the kaiju experience is pretty much toward the end of the film.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I think that was probably the movie itself was fairly well received, but I know specifically for Western audiences, the pacing was glacial. Like that was the complaints was, oh, we came to see Godzilla's on the title. Where's Godzilla?
Matt, are you still there? Hold on.
Say again, Matt. We lost you for like 30 seconds there. Okay, are you back,
Okay.
Matt?
Yeah, am I? Sorry, was I?
Yeah,
Can you hear
you were gone for like a minute.
Oh, sorry, I was talking about Godzilla.
Okay, give it a go again if
well.
you remember what you said.
Sorry, I think what I was saying was I was disappointed with the design of him. I don't know if you caught that, but that's sort of basically what I was saying. That I think in this version of him, I thought was a bit disappointing. I think it was in the sense that I think that, and I was saying this to my friends at the time when we watched it at the cinema, that I found him a bit overly stocky and a bit overly chunky as a design.
Okay.
I think that that he's a bit middle heavy. I know he's supposed to be to a degree, but I thought he sort of like his neck was too short and compared to some of the other versions of him. I wasn't bowled over by his design compared to others. I must admit, I was slightly disappointed with this Godzilla. You probably disagree with me, but that's sort of like what I think about it. I don't know. Just what are your thoughts on his design? Do you think he was designed well, or do you think it could have been done a bit better?
Dave, do you want to go with this first?
I'll go first. I agree that he was a little paunchy. It's not as evident in the small glimpses. It's really in the daylight toward the end of the film that we're getting a solid look at Godzilla. And as long as he's in motion and fighting, it's not a big deal. But it's the still shots, it's him. I mean, arguably the part where Godzilla is being triumphant, you're like, I don't know if that's the Godzilla I wanted to see, so I do see that they change it up. A large contention of the Godzilla franchise is his decrease in mass, height, size.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty incredible. There's several meters difference between each of the Godzillas.
Yeah, between the different Godzillas.
Yeah, I mean, it just scales a spectacle. We got to make this more. It scales with human technology. Building sizes have gotten bigger. So if Godzilla has to tower over them, he needs to also be much bigger.
Much bigger, which really shows off in this film, actually, because this Godzilla is, I think, just over 600 feet tall, something like that. Or was it over 300? What am I talking about?
300.
Yeah, 300. 600 seems to. He wasn't over the buildings. He was kind of in the middle of the buildings.
Yeah.
The very original 1954 Gojira, where he's about 50, 60 feet tall. That's still a pretty big increase.
It's substantial. I mean, we don't see the original Godzilla is basically towering over fishing villages. So huts, you don't have to make it that big.
My personal thoughts on
Yeah,
Yeah,
what's
my personal thoughts on
go ahead.
2014 Godzilla. I
Hmm.
personally, for the most part, throughout most of the film, I like the stockier, sort of larger overall appearance. Like, I
Okay.
feel it gives him a good sense of weight. There are certain shots where he just looks, quite frankly, a little bit ridiculous. Like, I think it's one of the daylight ones where he's walking away and he's just this perfectly sloped, almost triangle, going down to a very wide base at the ground, and maybe mix it up a little there. My favorite shots of him are the underwater shots where you just see just his back and the dorsal
Yeah.
plates rising up. Those are
Yeah. Definitely
fantastic,
agree.
fantastic shots. Quibble with him is probably the change to his skin texture, because this Godzilla is very natural and sort of scaled and leathery.
Yeah.
But the original Godzilla is horrifically scarred. It's a big point of symbolism in the original Godzilla is his skin looks like keloid scars, which are what happens when you get an atomic bomb dropped on you. Of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in that regard.
Hmm.
This one, he's just a natural creature. Which, I mean, he looks cool, but I feel it loses some of the symbolism of the potential destruction and devastation of nuclear power.
Well, I think that that's one that's an interesting point, and one that the Godzilla films in general and other media don't really wrestle with, but they play with.
Mm.
So Godzilla's
Yeah,
symbolism
yeah.
changes per era.
Mm.
The original
Yeah.
films, he's cast in the light of science and as the symbolism for nuclear war. He
Yeah.
never really loses that. That kind of keeps pace, but it'll change where he's framed as either a protector of Japan, or just a walking disaster, or a force of nature, which
Yeah,
is in this film he's repeatedly referred to as a force of nature, which I
yeah,
think is
and
gonna that ties into their design decision to make him a more
yeah,
natural looking thing, and maybe why he's a little paunchier, because he's basically a walking mountain.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's cool. I mean, personally, my favorite Godzilla design is probably the recent Shin Godzilla, but I'm sure we'll get onto that another time.
Yeah, I'm
I mean,
pretty excited for that one.
I think it also adds because I thought he always comes across as quite a tired Godzilla in this one. I know he's
Mm.
tired at the end of the fighting, but I think you definitely get this here. Oh, here I go again sort of vibe from him. Even from the very start that he's sort of he's now like they said, this is he's here to restore balance. Which obviously gets repeated quite a few times. That he's like, here you go again. Time for me to get out of retirement, and I'm
Yeah,
in a way that adds to it. And I'm not trying to trivialize him by saying he's got to middle age and he's put a few pounds on, but I think I think it adds to it that he's not lean and new. He's battle hardened, with the scars. He's a bit built up, that almost human like that. You stock up as as you get older, to survive
yeah,
longer, and
yeah.
and it's almost like that's reflective of in his design. It could be on purpose in that regard. So you know maybe I just don't like it, but it's just like I get the point. I do
Yeah,
get
yeah.
the point of it.
Okay, yeah.
And I think another to speak to that, I mean, he's not framed as Japan
Mm,
specifically in this
yes.
film.
Yep.
We get a little bit of that, but it's not as overt as the
Yeah.
earlier films.
He's honestly a lot more tied to the US, with the 1954 Bikini Atoll tests apparently being kill him.
Yeah, I mean they do take a big look at that, and that's another large sort of change, is where before that those tests were framed as maybe a creation of Godzilla,
Mm.
whereas this, since he's a natural force, was a blatant man's science and
Mm.
technology trying to control nature, as we see in previously in Pacific Rim. This is the flip side of that, where all of man's forces don't really have much of an effect, and
Yeah.
We didn't really get into it yet, but the Muto, our adversary for the film, man's vaunted military and technology pretty much does nothing, and we're forced to rely on an outside
Godzilla.
Mother Nature, Godzilla, to do the work for us.
Yeah.
Or in spite of us,
the,
really, because Godzilla cares not for whims of man.
Yeah, I believe the quote in the film is the arrogance of man is thinking that nature is under his control, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and then our toward the end of the film, our Dr. Sarazawa, the stand-in for Japan, basically. He literally says, "Just let them fight."
Let them fight.
Yeah.
It's not because to sit back and watch. It's because getting in the middle of that's a bad idea.
Which is going to make
it's not working so far. Let them deal with it.
Yeah, I mean that's something that shows up throughout the film. Oh, do you want to go, Matt?
I was just going to say it's quite human, isn't it? Where we like to get involved. We can't, it's difficult for us to stand by. We feel like we have to be in control of everything, including our environment. And, and like you said, I think wanting to get involved and then realizing, oh no, this is nature. I think at times we struggle to understand nature and understand that we really aren't in control of it. And I think, again, it highlights that fact that, like you said earlier, that there needs to be an external factor coming in to really show us that you're not in control of anything. You're barely in control of yourselves, let alone us, as forces of nature and such like. But that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, that is really sort of hammered in across the film, because what I was going to talk about is every time humanity attempts to interfere in this, they just make things worse. Because you have the Muto attack a power plant in Janjiro, I think it was, during the prequel, when our actual protagonist is a young boy. But then we just decide to study what's going on there for however many years until it gets out of control and the Muto are reintroduced into the world and Godzilla has to come. As being said, the Muto are attracted to radiation. We'll put a nuke on a train, send it out into the bay to attract them all out there, and they will blow it up. We've made it worse. The Muto took the nuke and put it in the middle of the city to build a nest with. Every time we attempt to interfere in this sort of battle between these two different forces of nature, things just get worse and worse until, as Dave said, Dr. Zerasawa says, no, just let them fight.
Well, actually, talking of the Muto, again, the whole nature side of things, I find that compared to what we were saying about Pacific Rim with the Kaiju, where they're just being just sent down, I like the Muto design, the whole male female side of things. I think that was quite a good little touch where like I said, where they're using the nuclear to basically breed and such like. I think again it showed it is light. It wasn't going, these are just aliens from another planet. It is actually where they, obviously they are unnatural, but the concept is still there. Like that they were going to breed and and try and take over and go with it. But I think that really highlights it home. Actually, I thought that was a very good design choice. Actually,
yeah, definitely.
And I do like that they went with that avian choice, where like the male's large but very much smaller than the female.
Yeah. Yeah, which I mean, you do see a fair bit in nature, but it's more of an insect and crustacean thing, I think. A lot of times you've got things like in praying mantises and stuff, the female is often far larger than the male, but it really played into this film where the female Muto is this big, heavy bruiser who's able to sort of take Godzilla on head to head, whereas the male is this little flighty thing that just flies around the city and attacks from behind and sort of attempts to knock Godzilla down so the two of them can just kick him in the ribs, basically. For a lot of the film, it feels like.
I think as well is that it was. I genuinely thought that at one point that the female was going to kill the male, like you do in nature. You know, I think is it spiders? I think where they they'll they'll mate and then kill the male. I could have seen that happen at one point. I genuinely thought that may happen, but I think the concept is definitely there, and I think and again I think they did it also in a weird way. I could be wrong, but also to make it the audience feel for the Muto, in a sense that what I mean is that obviously like when he it causes the explosion to kill the what she had laid, the eggs that she had laid effectively, and obviously the despair on her face, of a monster. But you thought, actually there was that little part of you that thinks, oh, that's a real shame actually. But it's again humans interfering again, but for the right reason, but for survival reasons.
Yeah, and the film, I mean, it went really far to anthropomorphize more so the Muto, like you were saying, in those small moments. And yeah, I definitely, I think when the male Muto gives the nuclear bomb at the end to the female, it's like, oh, yeah, I totally thought like, oh, she's just gonna crush him or something, and the job's done.
Yeah,
because obviously she's already somehow been fertilized. It didn't cover that part. I thought they just met, but already she's full of eggs. Okay.
There's a few gaps in a lot of it, I must admit, but we'll go with it.
I think they get the tender moment. There's that bit where they're sort of just rubbing faces, which I guess the closest we get to Kaiju kissing. But
that's the name of the episode, isn't it?
Oh, that's got to be the episode name.
Kaiju kissing.
Kaiju kissing.
Well, there we go. I mean, there's like you can sense emotion and intent behind not just the Muto, but also Godzilla to at least some degree in this film, which I think is a big plus for it. Like they're not just these immovable bastions of natural force; they're also still living, thinking things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Matt brought that up perfectly clear when he was, saying that Godzilla just seemed weary, tired, and justifiably so. But it's still read very clearly. It wasn't an ambiguous feeling.
Oh no, definitely not. And I mean, this Godzilla is fairly intelligent as well, which I mean, most of them are. I mean, in the eras of Godzilla where he's sort of a champion, the people running around, he's obviously intelligent, but you see this one sort of learn throughout its fights as well. After I think it's 2 or 3 times of the male Muto attacking it from behind, Godzilla sort of anticipates this happening again and just slams him into the side of the building with his tail, and you're gone, even if you're something as big as a Muto. That was a really.
I think the tiredness does come across even the way he fights as well. That he's which I know it happens in other films where the good guy gets swarmed and to win in the end. But even the way he takes them out, like you just described with the male, it's effectively a flick of the tail. And then when he comes to taking out the female, with obviously in a very great way, I must admit, the way he takes it's fantastic. But it's very, very matter of fact. As in, when I saw it, I was very surprised by it in the sense that it just comes out of nowhere. He's like, "Come here," opens the mouth, and obviously does the flame breath into. So it's very sort of like, oh, okay, that's it then. He's almost like Godzilla's going, all right, there you go. See you later. I'm off. Bye. So like he just gets such.
I'm going back.
Yeah, effectively, like like the weariness comes across. Like he's like, okay, I've had enough now. Let's get this done. There's no real epic fight in that sense. You expect that when it was just him and the female, that it would probably drag on a bit longer. There would be a bit more to and fro in, but it was quite done, quite finalized, which really surprised me actually. But it's a good design choice.
Yeah, I mean, it really worked. If you're that, he's tired. I mean, he literally just collapses post-fight.
Yeah,
that was his last. Like he's like, I got one more round left of me, and we're just gonna finish this. But I know iconically, that the first charge up of the breath attack. I remember being in the theater, and I was just like, yes, this is great.
Yeah,
He's doing
Yeah.
it.
When you first hear that tone, that low tone start to build up, and just go, oh wait, no, this is the moment. You see the sort of the dorsal fins light up, and then there's just this stream of blue fire, and it looks fantastic. It's such a really cathartic moment. It's really fantastic.
Exactly, and unlike a movie we might cover later, he doesn't fly with it, which is cool. Launch himself backwards.
Oh, that brings me back.
But yeah, no, I think it was an excellent way to end it. Just to a coup de grace. Just here, we're done.
Oh yeah,
bah.
and incredibly tightly, just sort of drop the head in the water almost unceremoniously, and just
yeah.
And then just go back for a nap. He did go
Yeah.
back to hibernate. Could be also why he's a little bit chunkier in this one. He's been sleeping it off for a while.
Yeah.
It's that winter job. Yeah.
I mean, it probably has to be. He spends so long in between emergences. It's not to contrast it against the Pacific Rim.
Yeah.
These kaiju are an event that's annual. Becoming monthly, weekly,
by the end of the
daily,
film,
hourly. I mean, that's how it's a shrinking schedule. Godzilla is the great equalizer. I mean, we get 50 years in between when he first showed up and then this time. So, I mean, he would have to have put on a considerable amount of weight there to just sit in the bottom of the ocean, chilling.
Not do anything, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's why he's king of the monsters.
Yeah, he doesn't need to prove anything. Goes up every now and again, kicks some ass, and then goes back to sleep.
Just a one and done. One thing to kind of bridge the gap a little more between this and the film we'll be talking about next is the company Monarch.
Yes.
So this is the company that is built to study kaiju, for lack of a better term, and the fact that this exists. I remember watching Godzilla, and I'll have to go back, but I don't recall this being mentioned in any other part of the franchise. I felt like it's a newer thing. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Started it with 2014 Godzilla. They're obviously carrying it on with the new Kong.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to build the MonsterVerse, is what they're going to call it.
Yes.
And have official monster movie universe to set all their films in, which I'm looking forward to be honest.
Yeah, it's part of the Legendary Studios who's producing these. But the existence of the company, I mean, I just think it's great because you get those very eccentric characters, but that are driven to a specific purpose and trying to prove their point, but still get their budget.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is a fantastic, it's a good contrast. We're here to study the biggest and the baddest things. No one believes us, so we need a reasonable excuse to get our budget.
Yeah. Well, I think it's highlighted more when we move on to Kong, isn't it? Really, because like I said, in Godzilla, you only get a little mention of Monarch. You don't, you have a hint of what. Whereas obviously in Kong, you get an actual. Oh, that is what they definitely do. Right? Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, good continuity there.
Yeah, they I think the way it's framed is you get a taste. You don't really know what they're about until you see the next film in the series. But what that does is that makes the second viewing of going back and watching Godzilla again after seeing Kong, it's putting a lot more things in their place and giving more meaning, I think, to the film that the directors hopefully intended the first go round, but it's benefiting multiple viewings.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. When we get fully onto Kong, this new Kong movie is technically a prequel to Godzilla 2014, I guess.
Yeah.
In that it's set earlier in the timeline, but also we've got our post film sort of little teaser, which I was the only person in my theater to say to watch, but it shows sort of a teaser of what Monarch's up to, but also a teaser of Godzilla as well as a sort of
I missed that on that too.
Or something.
Yeah, so did I.
Sat there for like the full 5-10 minutes just waiting to see what would happen. It's actually fairly good. It's sort of an interview scene with Tom Hiddleston and the female protagonist from the film that then transitions to sort of what am I thinking of the word? Slideshow shots of evidence Monarch's been collecting, one of which is a cave painting showing possibly what could be interpreted as Godzilla and maybe King Ghidorah, which that's a thing for the future, but
yeah, no, that's great. I knew that they were going to do something. I think they may have just been tired that day, and I watched the first part of the credit sequence, and I was like, you know what, I'll this will benefit a future viewing. I'll go see this again, and then stay in the credits.
Yeah, well, it's worked for it's worked for Marvel, hasn't it? So
do we have anything else to cover? I think we kind of think we did Godzilla's due diligence.
I mean, to tie something in earlier on when we were talking about Leatherback for Pacific Rim, Matt, you mentioned that that sort of ties into Godzilla a bit. To clarify, that is the Muto also emit an electromagnetic pulse whenever they move, which makes them a little more difficult to deal with for our modern society, obviously.
Yes.
Just tying up loose ends there.
Yep, I agree.
Excellent. Yeah, we didn't really. We covered the Muto pretty well. They're, I guess, for any listeners who are listening to this and hadn't watched Godzilla, they're giant avian kaiju. Roughly this. Oh, the male is a little bit bigger than a fighter plane.
Yeah, a bit bigger.
The female maybe 3 times that size.
Yeah, they're both pretty big. Both tiny compared to Godzilla, obviously, but
the female was
he's the star of the show.
3/4 the size of Godzilla, I think.
Yeah.
I think if she could go on hind legs, she would have probably been almost as tall as him. She's sort of more squat, and because obviously she's on all fours, so I think if you include her length, she would probably almost be on par with him. She's on her front legs, basically.
I mean, we talked about Godzilla being chunky earlier, but there is this massive difference in sheer mass between the Muto and Godzilla. Like, Godzilla probably weighs 10 times as much as the male and probably 5 to 6 times more than the female, just on his own.
Yeah.
I mean, we see that when you're kind of watching like the fights and he's using his tail. It's sending them flying.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, the weight classing is definitely a thing.
It's 2 featherweights versus a heavyweight. For most of the film.
Yeah,
they were
doing pretty well.
They definitely did well. Couldn't win in the end, unfortunately.
Or fortunately, I think it would have been bad if Godzilla didn't win.
Maybe, obviously. But shall we move on to Kong, Skull Island?
Yes, let's do it.
So, Kong, Skull Island. This came out to date the podcast, 2017. And who do we have a director for this? Who directed this?
Christ! I should look this up.
I should have really. I've had Wikipedia pages open for both Godzilla and Pacific Rim. I didn't open one for Kong.
It's Jordan. Directed by Jordan Vogt Roberts.
Roberts?
Vogt. I think that's German, I think, isn't it?
Something like that.
It sounds German.
Yeah. He's very bearded.
Yes, he is. Seeing his interviews, it looks like he and Josh might be friends.
I'll say. Brothers from another mother, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say he did fairly well with his uh major film, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's surprisingly good film actually.
Mm.
Kong. I think it's actually again one of those where because I when I spoken to friends and they said, "Oh, have you seen it?" and they're comparing it to the Jack Black King
Mm.
Kong.
Oh yeah, Peter Jackson's 2005 one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's one of those which it could have been a bit run of the mill, but I think
Yeah.
overall it's actually a very good film. Actually, I think it's definitely worth a watch. Considering how new
Yeah.
it is, it's yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I definitely loved the film. There are a few instances where I thought the dialogue was pretty bad. There's
yeah.
some bits that don't seem super well written, but as a whole, a super super cool, super fun movie. I really dug the 70s aesthetic. I don't know
Mm.
about Dave, if that's your
This one, I
thing.
mean, I enjoyed the fact that it's basically Apocalypse Now mashed up with King Kong, and they
Yeah,
didn't go wrong with that.
Oh, I
no,
didn't even think of the Apocalypse Now thing. Oh yeah, no,
oh
definitely.
yeah,
I can see that.
So yeah, I mean, you're hitting that Heart of Darkness, Joseph Conrad stuff pretty
Mm,
hard in this film.
yeah, yeah.
You have the basic uh, Captain Ahab archetype with
Mm,
Samuel L.
yeah.
Jackson's character, which he he doesn't over. He just Samuel L. Jacksoned the character
Yeah,
very well.
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
much. Yeah. And also this movie, our basic premise is Monarch's back at it again in a prequel, attempting to get funding for a trip to an uncharted island in the. Is it actually in the Bermuda Triangle, or is it just like the Bermuda
No,
Triangle? Is it more like
it's
that?
likened to it. Yeah,
Yeah,
It's
this island.
yeah, it's close to Saipan. It's in
Okay.
Southeast Asia.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense then. Yeah, yeah. So the idea is that it's the 70s. We're in the thick of the Cold War, and satellite mapping has revealed this previously undiscovered island. There have been rumors of, and Monarch's been picking up on, but no one's ever. And Monarch hitches a ride on an expedition, I think.
yep, they do.
Yes, they bully their way, I guess, calling some favors for
Yeah.
a politician.
Yeah,
Got to get things done. But this island is a fantastic environment for monsters, apparently, because this movie is pretty full of them.
yeah, it is actually. I think in some ways it almost on level with Kong. I think the actual the
Mm.
even the monsters or the local wildlife really in some ways
Yeah.
is it really does. They've gone to town with that in a way actually, and I think it's actually some very strong representation in that regard as well. I think that they
Mm.
rather than just sort of just normal having a few birds, having a few local wildlife, they've actually made them unique in their own way, and obviously you can see where they're a twist on conventional. You got the one that looks obviously like a bison. That's obviously a
Mm.
like I think luckily they managed to get the line right because it's if I'm using that example, it almost looks like they've got a bison, and where they've got it as an experiment with when in on other media where you get an animal that's combined with has nuclear sort of contact, and it just goes in goes bigger in size and such, like it could have been a bit
Yeah.
silly, but it wasn't, to be fair. I think they got that just right where it plays nicely into the story, but it didn't get too silly, so I think they did well on that.
Yeah, I going into this movie, I went in blind. I don't even think I saw a trailer. I was like, I'm just gonna go watch King Kong. And what really surprised me wasn't the inclusion of the other monsters, which was a very pleasant surprise. I was expecting King
Mm.
Kong, and then I don't know what else is gonna happen.
Yep.
They definitely took that ball and ran with it. But no, but what surprised me was the movies in the U.S. rating system is a PG-13.
Yeah.
Watching the movie, this was an R. It's very violent, very graphic, and it didn't do the movie a disservice. I think that they were fine with what they had, and I wonder what they had to cut out to keep it at that
PG,
lower rating.
Technically, yeah.
I want to see a director's cut for this, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely you could see where they've toned it down, but they were quite clever with it. Where one of the scientists is being taken away by the birds or the bird-like creatures, and you see his arm getting severed off by the by the bill of one of those sort of creatures. But obviously they've done it where it's not gory because they've done it in the shadow of the sun. So all you see is the black outline. It goes right through his arm, which obviously looks gory, but they sort of, I think that's how they managed to get around it. Those little tweaks which make it not so gory, and also the one with the sort of spider, like in the trees, the spider. I mean, that bit I was not expecting at all, where it puts its leg through his mouth effectively. I mean, it's
tent pulled him.
Yeah, basically. But again, it wasn't done overly gory. Obviously, it was quite a horrific scene, but I think that's how they managed to get around it.
They didn't linger. It was a brief shot, and what's interesting is that echoes scenes and box art from I want to say it's Cannibal Holocaust or Cannibal Ferox. It's a 70s Italian schlock films. But they're taking a lot of sources and again I think Apocalypse Now and some more films, but they're paying homage to a bunch of little things, which is great because that gives the audience something to look forward to for repeated viewings. It gives you a reason to come back and watch it again, aside from it being a stellar film.
Would come back and watch just for the scene of the two pilots, the American pilot and the Japanese pilot, on the beach, sort of having this almost comedic fight right after the planes have both crashed.
Oh, exactly. And then we get the first glimpse of Kong there in the beginning, and it's clear
take
that
advantage. They show him
a little bit larger than he was last time.
Yeah.
I think I saw a scale comparison, and I think Peter Jackson's Kong comes up to about his knee, something like that.
I was surprised how early you saw a glimpse of him. Again, contrasting some of the other films like Godzilla, where you don't really see him for a while or anything. You actually see Kong, even though you don't see that much of Kong, you see him quite early compared to other films. And I thought I must admit, when after that little scene with the two pilots fighting, I must admit my heart did drop slightly because I thought, it's not going to be silly, is it? Where it's got to have a little bit of humor, but I thought, is it not? But they definitely make up with it, because there's definitely some scenes, even like when you first meet Kong properly, when he's taking out the helicopters, that was fantastic. That was fantastic. That bit
is an amazing scene.
It really is. With this slow motion, with the trees, it's just very well done. Really well done. I must admit, that was, you did not see that coming. I mean, you knew something was going to happen soon when they got through the that fog part, but the storm, but. Yeah. That was very well done. Very, very stylish, but in a good way.
Yeah, for sure. I one thing that's super interesting is for something so large to remain so hidden in the middle of a battle. Like those helicopters, they have a pretty good aerial view. They kept losing sight of it. But it was framed in a way that you could see that it's that kind of fog of war. You don't know what's going on, but it was very effective in making this almost a horror movie.
Yeah. I mean,
suspenseful. At least to say the least.
Yeah.
You get a sense of scope and a sense of Godzilla stakes and vulnerability.
Yeah. I mean that giant monster is almost invisible thing happened in Godzilla 2. He just pops up occasionally and no one seems to have noticed he's shown up until the tail goes over and stuff like that. But no, that particular sequence was ding.
Yeah, it was
Kong taking on a fleet of helicopters.
But it's also done in a way where it was stylish in the sense that he what even though he was being quite brutal, he was being quite clever with it as well. You know, the fact that rather than him just being a Hulk, Hulk smash situation, the fact he threw the palm tree, and it was just cleverly done. It was actually showing, he's been there for a while, but he's not stupid. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to protect himself, and the island itself. So I think they and also you see that later as well. With the later fights with the he's not stupid, which is again well done.
This definitely shows off how smart Kong can be. I reckon this film does.
I mean, he is framing this island clearly as his home, his turf. I mean, he's using the environment to his advantage, but as his weapon. I think that's really neat.
He feels right at home on the island as well. There's a point slightly later in the film where Kong is in a lake and is attacked by a giant octopus. And I had this moment of, there's going to be a big fight. No, Kong just grabs a tentacle, steps on its head, and pulls it apart and starts eating it.
He's just having a snack.
Like, he is he is completely calm and relaxed in his own personal kingdom.
Yeah, if anything, I mean, scenes like that, which happen a few times, that gives you, or the audience, a much better sense of Kong, I think, than Godzilla did for Godzilla. I mean, we talked about it a little bit. You get that sense of tiredness, that weariness is the thing that goes through and levels the field. Kong doesn't. That's not his role. He's the king that just kind of chills out and then takes care of business when he needs to. But he doesn't ever seem tired. I don't feel that weariness. There's not like a resignation. He's just like there to do his thing.
Well, they admit that in the film, I think, as well, that they say he's not even fully grown at that stage that you see him in the film. Where you see the remains of his parents, but you can tell he's still quite young at that point. Obviously, I don't know how young, but it shows that he's still learning. He's almost like you can tell he's almost like a young adult. Where he's getting, where he's just past sort of teenage, where he's growing, but he's not, and he's getting more experience. But he's not quite there yet. He's sort of almost getting there. So I think they deliberately did that.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure. I mean, they with this being set as a prequel to Godzilla, or at least that timeline, he's not the size at that point that would match up to what we see as Godzilla.
Yeah.
So they kind of had to go, hey, he's not done growing yet. He's going to be bigger.
Yeah, I think it's this Kong is in the vicinity of about 120 feet, which puts him at about a third of Godzilla's size comparatively.
Yeah.
Which I mean, that's astounding. He's very big in this movie.
Yeah.
He's massive in this movie, but
Godzilla we don't really see Godzilla next to people.
No.
I mean, next to buildings, yes, but this you're getting Kong next to helicopters, next to ships, next to people holding them in his hand. There's a clear sense of scale.
Yeah.
And even doubling his size, it's like mind-boggling. Which that's what I love about these films is just sense of scale, and when they can really when that really hammers home, when you realize just how big these things are. I watched an interview with the director, and someone asked, why did you make Kong so big? Like, is it to potentially fight Godzilla at some point? He went, no. We got the basic design down, and then we kept scaling him up until I looked at an image of him and went, okay, that's big enough that the first thing you see when you think is, this is a god. This is the king of wherever it is. Like, that sense of scale is intended to sort of induce just awe and reverie whenever you look at him walk into view. And I think it works.
Definitely.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to that scene where he's with the squid, I mean, that's the kind of feeling you get is the effort he put into that was secondhand. He's just like, oh, I'm just reaching up to get an apple or
Oh,
something.
getting some calamari for dinner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's just
Yeah,
popping
no,
out of the
he's
store.
certainly his sort of own effortless power within the island. Although there are certain forces at work giving him a run for his money every now and again.
Exactly, and that brings us to the skull crawlers, as they're
Mm.
so aptly named. I don't even think that's aptly. That's just what he came up with. Mr. John C.
I mean,
Riley, the
they
best
Yeah.
character in the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
oh,
He's
he's
brilliant.
amazing. I love
Yeah.
him so much.
But you can definitely see though the skull crawlers look, well, to me anyway, they look very similar to in Godzilla. I definitely get that vibe about. They're sort of that sort of where they're similar sort of facial look to them. Even their claws are very similar. Not entirely, but I definitely
But
got
I
that
mean,
vibe about
no,
them.
very reptilian
Mm.
in nature as opposed to Kong, who is a giant gorilla.
Yeah,
Clearly,
yeah.
but no, I really like the skull crawlers overall design. I think their skull is basically exposed, which is part of why they're called that. But it's really interesting because you get to see sort of all the nasal cavities and stuff that make them look so sort of gaunt and terrifying. It's
It's
actually a very nice sort of design to just be able to see the intricacies of the head.
exactly, and that sort of slightly plays in with what I said earlier about it being sort of slightly horror-like in some ways because and I think that's sort of a theme throughout the whole film really, where you get these sort of you get these moments with, especially with the soundtrack. The soundtrack's very prominent in this film compared to others. Obviously playing a lot of the music of the time. This sort of happy-go-lucky, and then bang, something bad happens, or and I think that's sort of what they were going for. And again, the same with the skull crawlers, that they wanted to have some sort of visual look on them, saying, look, these don't muck around. And obviously they did sort of hype up what's going to be the big one in the end, which obviously the mother one, which you could see coming, but they definitely have that sort of impact on them. Almost look at where like I said, because they're a skull, you don't really see that they're soulless. They've got nothing to them, which is scary. That's a scary way of doing things. So yeah, I definitely think there's a slight horror element to it.
Yeah, it feels like with the monsters in this, aside from Kong, they don't have that sense of emotion that we got from like the Muto. Say,
Yeah.
everything
Well,
in this is just existing in its own ecosystem, and man being dwarfed, immeasurably by pretty much everything in there, doesn't belong in that place.
Yeah.
Part of it is a lot of the quote unquote monsters in this movie are just animals living their lives. There's no sort of the giant stick insect, which is mistaken for a fallen tree at one point. But, it just stands up and then sees something dangerous and just sort of backtracks its way out very quickly. It's not interested in being a monster.
No.
It's interested in living its life undisturbed. It's just another animal living in this monstrous island.
But again, it highlights what we said, in comparison with Godzilla, where you see humans shouldn't be involved in things, and it's almost like in Kong, the locals, they know where the boundaries are. They worship Kong, and they stay away from the skull crawlers. It's the known thing. Whereas whereas in contrast with Godzilla, people are getting involved. But then I suppose in Kong, people are getting involved. The soldiers and Monarch are there where they shouldn't be, and obviously they face consequences of it. And again, I think it's that underlying theme: humans don't get involved with nature.
Yeah.
Or at least not to a destructive degree. I mean, they're not there for peace. They're not there to even just to study.
No, I mean,
it's a cash grab. It's a way to capitalize on nature, or even like native tribes, that colonialism. I mean, that's a theme that's in a lot of the kaiju films as well, and it's no less prevalent here. I mean, it's set post Vietnam War, so
Yeah,
you're
right at the end of the
they're
Vietnam
hammering that
War.
one home too.
Yeah. And I mean, like, dropping bombs all over the place to ostensibly map it out. And there's just a great shot of the pilot with this sort of fixed grin, this sort of manic grin, and all you can see, you can't see his eyes. He's just got these hyper reflective
sunglasses,
aviator glasses on, and it's sort of that idea of reveling in this destruction of nature, which is immediately contrasted with Kong throwing a palm tree through the cockpit, of course.
But again, it highlights that get you at the end of the day. If you act arrogant and think you own the place, you'll get your comeuppance at the end, which is true.
And I think that's another aspect of the film that I don't know if it surprised me, but there's not really any safe characters.
No,
everyone. No. It felt like watching Aliens, like the second one.
Yeah.
People in a place they shouldn't be doing something they probably shouldn't be doing, trying to study something they probably shouldn't be studying, and they don't fare well.
Yeah, they really don't.
And unfortunately, there's quite a few likable characters that don't make the cut. I think for audience attachment reasons, like the captain, who was by the giant walking stick. That I was actually like upset about that part.
Well, they spend the whole movie ribbing on his letters. Everyone calls him Dear Billy.
Dear Billy, yeah.
Because he's always writing to his wife and kid, and they really build him up. They're like, oh, I hope he makes it through the movie. He does not make it through the movie.
No, he gets killed off far too easily. It was a shame because, like I said, you could see him almost Tom Hiddleston, that sort of character where he's gonna be there at the end saving the day. He'll similar to what the other soldier who sacrifices himself a bit needlessly.
Oh, the worst part.
Bad.
It was.
I felt so bad with that.
Yeah, it was. You felt like that at least. Was it Chapman? I think Chapman was his name, wasn't he?
It was Cole. I've got the Wikipedia up. I think it was Cole.
So sorry, I meant the one that they got killed off needlessly. The one, the Dear Billy one is Chapman, I think. And like I said, you could see him doing, not as brash as Cole did it, but you think he would do something, sacrifice or at least something. But but then to be fair, I think that's a good thing sometimes where they do that sort of thing, because I think sometimes things do get a bit predictable. So I think maybe that's where it's almost with John Goodman's character as well. That you could see him getting killed off. That didn't surprise me, but again, he got killed off quite easily. Like he just went, oh, here we go, he's dead now. It's sort of like, oh, okay, work your way through him.
Yeah, they did a lot of red herrings, I think, in the film. A lot of things were to subvert expectations. So you see, I want to say it's the captain. He arrived at the little lake, and you see the squid tentacles in the water, and you're going, oh, it's going to get him or something. Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that gets flipped on its head because Kong shows up and just dispatches the squid.
Yep.
Then you get the walking stick part, and I'm going, maybe he scared it off, and no,
he did not scare it off. Turns around.
But at the same time, it's nice to have attachments to these characters because you're more invested in the film.
Oh, definitely, definitely. That I'd say a strength of the film is that have this at least one likable quality to them. Like everyone stands out just enough that you don't quite forget anyone, and you kind of like everybody at least a little bit.
Which I think contrasts to Godzilla, because personally, I didn't really care about any of the humans in Godzilla. Really, I don't think they were quite. I mean, the father, was it Bryan Cranston? He his character to a degree, because you felt sorry for him, but everyone else, including you didn't really care about them. There's nothing wrong with them, but there was nothing about them that sort of, even though, which is quite ironic considering they did focus on the human element a lot in that film, where where almost Godzilla takes second place for a lot of that. That they didn't, they weren't particularly strong human characters. Where in this one, ironically, even though you do see a good bit of Kong and such like, they're actually quite strong. So which makes it overall a better film, I think.
It's certainly more enjoyable. I mean, I would watch Kong more often or sooner again than I was perfectly fine with seeing Godzilla once every 5 years, you know. So it wasn't a big deal.
Is that your schedule, is it?
Yeah.
I must watch it every 5 years.
Every 5 years. But thankfully there's, you know, another 40 Godzilla movies to watch in the meantime.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Plenty of movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see myself watching this new Kong movie a fair few times once it comes out on DVD and Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm.
Which, at the rate things go now, should be in about a month and a half, 2 months.
Yeah. I think that's about right.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of different creatures on the island. We've got the birds with saw beaks for some godforsaken reason.
They're almost
there, I think
they're almost like pterodactyls, aren't they? Really?
Yeah.
Definitely dinosaur.
There is that terrifying moment where I think it's Samuel L. Jackson shoots one.
Oh yeah.
And then the entire tree just goes up, and you're like, "Oh, I thought that was an actual tree."
Yeah, yeah.
And not only that, but I thought it was going to swarm them and then just buzzsaw people.
That was my immediate thought as well.
Yeah, they used it effectively because you're just like really worried about that part. But at the same time, it didn't feel like it feels like it was just a blank round, like it didn't pay off. But then we do see it pay off with the guy on the boat.
Oh yeah, later on in the film. Yeah. We also have our bamboo spider, which was honestly the most unexpected design in the film for me. I didn't expect there to be a monster in that sequence, and then suddenly you see the bamboo moving, and one guy just gets.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Also, the other guy gets caught up in the web and he's pulled up to it, and you're just like, it's like a daddy long legs or something, but it's horrific. Like I don't want to get that close to it. Keep it up in the at the top of the leg stalks.
Yeah, I'm friends with daddy long legs. Those guys are fine. That thing is not fine.
Well, I suppose you're used to all sorts out there, aren't you? Really?
Yeah.
Daddy
Well, I
legs
mean,
are nothing to you, probably.
I've seen a redback lift a 6-inch skink off the ground and kill and eat it, so daddy long legs are fine. And that's how we got rid of our foosball table. Couldn't have that anymore.
Do monsters in our backyard?
Yeah,
pretty much.
There's plenty out here. Get some scorpions rolling up.
Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah. And then we've mentioned the stick insect that looks like a log. It's not so much a monster as it just kind of toodles off trying to save its own hide.
That's most of them.
We've got skull crawlers. I think that's most of them.
Yeah. For their origins, we get this movie and presumably Godzilla kind of takes the Hollow Earth theory, or at least aspects of it. So these monsters, they're not like the kaiju in Pacific Rim. They're not coming from another dimension. They're from Earth, just somewhere deep within the core or within the ground. I think that's really interesting because it gives you that idea. Maybe that's where Godzilla is hibernating. He's not. I don't imagine he's like can breathe water. I don't think he's perfectly.
He has
aquatic.
gills.
I think he's a lizard. Does he?
He does have gills. Yeah. I don't know if they're 100% effective, but it's the shot where he destroys the San Francisco bridge is because he gets shot in the gills and actually collapses onto it as part of his design. It's they're very hard to see, which is part of that design that I also don't like.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
They just look like large flat scales on the side of his neck, but they are a weak point. They're just kind of hard to see against the rest of his design.
Oh, interesting.
Good to know.
But this Hollow Earth theory is actually pretty interesting because it lets them just from out of the ground.
Yeah, well, I mean, it creates a whole other ecosystem, and again provides that giant variety that we get with the kaiju from Pacific Rim with the 50
Yeah.
different kaiju.
Yeah.
You can have anything can be
Yeah.
you know made much larger and more frightening, but then you have the idea like the skull crawlers aren't you don't look at them and go, oh, that's based off of something. They're more like a chimera or an amalgam.
Yeah.
So
It's
what
just
else is there?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a few clues as to what might be down there. I've pulled up the Wikipedia page. The post-credit sequence shows archive footage of cave paintings depicting Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah.
Yeah.
Might be down there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, which makes sense. We have the classic Monster Island is a mainstay from the Godzilla franchise.
Yeah.
And I would be excited to see Mothra again.
Oh yes.
Yeah. I'm personally, I kind of want to see how they try and do a more realistic King Ghidorah, because that's a pretty difficult design to make look the more naturalistic route they're taking with the newer monsters.
Yeah, I think the 3 heads is going to be tough, but it's an awesome design.
Absolutely.
And hopefully they don't go the robot route. Well,
Oh, please.
Could happen.
Please don't.
I mean, hey, they got to build giant robots to fight giant monsters, right?
Exactly.
And they've done it before.
Yeah, they've done it.
Mecha Godzilla.
But
Hey, what happened?
it happens. So, I mean, sort of the majority of the movie is these guys trying to just sort of cross the island and make their way out. But we do end up with a pretty lengthy sort of climax sequence when becomes completely determined to kill Kong and sort of sets a lake on fire.
Yeah.
Sort of beginning the end sequence of the film. I personally really liked that scene. It had really good lighting and everything, but this great image of Kong just standing there in this lake and Samuel L. Jackson just watching him burn. I'm like, it's not going to last. Just move. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Get out of there.
I think it was good having the 2 groups, where you got the soldiers and basically Tom Hiddleston and the scientist and the reporter and such. Like, I think it was a good good little where they kept switching between the 2 of them, but it didn't feel cheesy. The fact that they were sort of going between the 2 and being their stereotypes, and such. Like, I think that was well done actually, and I think that, like I say, when it comes to that, where they eventually meet up, that sort of works quite well actually. But I think the whole Samuel Jackson thing is, again, I think showing arrogance, human arrogance as well. It's again to show we can the sort of almost the evil side of us, that we will try and take out, and sort of take it out and think about it afterwards, even though there was no real reason. Clearly see that Kong is just it was almost self-defense really, with the helicopters, but he obviously didn't see it that way, and he's almost that blinkered vision, but then I suppose he's post-war as well, isn't he? So I suppose that again, it could be highlighting that you get a bit that mindset kicks in really, once you're in the killing mode, it sort of takes over a bit.
Yeah, and I think it was a good counterpoint to the rest of the film. So the entire time we're kind of seeing man versus nature, but then that sequence there is man versus man, and you have that kind of classic Mexican standoff, which was great. It was really well, and you're definitely personally not at any point was I actually ever rooting for Samuel L. Jackson. I was going, I think he's just doing this all kind of wrong. But you understand him at least, and that's what makes a good villain. Yeah, I mean, he has a motive, and it's clear. It may not be correct, but you see what he's trying to do, and he thinks he's doing right. And because of that, I mean, the character is done well.
Yeah, exactly, and it definitely came across that he was doing it to get revenge for his men that he lost, as opposed to protecting the outside world. I know there was a slight element of that. He does mention that we do our, as soldiers, we do our job. So, people back home don't have to experience any of this. But you could tell he was doing it more for his men, which was quite admirable. Again, wrong reasons, but an admiral, it's sort of that bit conflicted, where you want to hate him, but there's that part of you that doesn't hate him.
Well, I mean, that's even evident just in his men. I mean, the loyalty that he inspires, even for characters. The name escapes me, but there's the younger soldier who was with the other group and saw everything they saw about Kong, and still was willing just to do what the general said. He was just going to go along with it, and I don't know if it's because he agreed with it, following orders, a combination of those things, but he did have his, of course, like second thoughts, which adds tension to the scene.
Yeah, and unceremoniously squashed by Kong at one point. But,
because Kong doesn't care about people.
No, not at all.
Unless you're female.
Kong
Yes. He cares about some people, but the ones that are trying to murder him, no, not so much.
Yeah.
No, definitely doesn't have any sympathy to spare for them. I mean, he's been protecting this sort of native civilization here his whole life as well, so...
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's his idea of if he's a king, I don't think, he may not see that particularly as his subjects, but they're things that are not as strong as other stuff, and he recognizes that on some level.
Yeah.
And just,
definitely,
dispenses his version of justice.
There's a pretty extreme version of justice.
Well, given the scale, he's probably just like, I'm just gonna swat a fly. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not the same reasoning. I mean, you're looking at it, he's ginormous, and it's the opposite. It's everything to him is that micro size. So
yeah.
Why are his concerns are lesser about those things?
Definitely. And we do end up with a pretty fantastic fight scene, at least in my opinion, with Kong against a giant skullcrawler, sort of hinted earlier in the movie by what was the character by
John C. Reilly's character.
I've lost the name.
I can't think of his name.
His name was Hank. Okay, Hank Marlowe. Yeah, Hank John C. Reilly's character sort of implies early on that Kong doesn't have trouble if skullcrawlers wake up as long as he gets them while they're small.
Small, yeah.
Somewhere out there is the big one that killed his parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows up right in time for the end of the movie, and this is a pretty awesome fight. It's more of a chase almost.
Yeah.
It shows up right after Samuel L. Jackson injures Kong.
Yeah, and I do the fight itself involves Kong, the Skullcrawler, and the people. So you're kind of getting all the gamut, the range of everyone that you're dealing with in the film.
Yeah.
And I think that's effective. And unlike the sort of final, just abrupt ending in Godzilla, this went on satisfyingly long.
But this one fight felt like, what, almost 10 minutes?
It was probably
about that, yeah. I mean, especially for me personally, the whole thing where he was using the chain fist with the rope propeller was fantastic. I mean, again, let's be honest, that is a bit Jaeger-like, isn't it? Really, the fact that you got a weapon on the that was deliberate, or at least a homage to it. That was fantastic. I mean, I think that that again, what I said earlier in Pacific Rim with the when you're looking at the pilots and they're actually punching, and then obviously the Jaeger punches. It was all that similar sort of thing. When you see him when he's got it wrapped around his fist, like, I know what's going to happen now.
Yeah.
yeah. Go on, hit him. It's very well done.
I think it provides something interesting in considering where they're potentially taking this this franchise and making this a combination. Godzilla with King Kong versus King Kong, but I don't know how they're going to spin it. But King Kong, even at this younger version, seems more competent as a fighter because that's what he does. He's constantly doing this. He's not in a soft world. He's not just chilling in the ocean and popping up every so many years to deal with trouble. He's in the mix.
Yeah,
and
it keeps him fresh.
Sure.
Yeah. Exactly. I think that, like I said, it's almost like Godzilla's a bit like the old timer that sort of comes out, stretches off and has to sort of get back up to speed with things. Whereas, like I said, Kong is sort of in the motion all the time, so he's constantly adapting. He's obviously learned about the palm trees. He's learned, he's learned how to use the that chain and propeller and such like. That's big contrast there.
Yeah, contrast.
Hey, that could be another name of the podcast.
Oh man,
the name of the episode.
Could be.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any final thoughts on this one? I don't want to go too long in the tooth.
I like this movie. I like Matt was saying, like how it shows Kong is very smart in this movie. He's always learning and adapting, especially during the fights. Overall, really fantastic movie. Really fantastic Kong. I think he looks really great in this movie. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with Cameron. I think that it's one that was, the style of it was done well. I think that it could have been comedic. I know it does have its slightly funny moments. It could have gone too much the other way. It didn't. It was very stylish, and I think it's almost put Kong across as not just a dumb ape, which I think some people would probably, people that either watch Kong or have not a bit of knowledge about King Kong, is he comes across as just a smash things big ape, and he really isn't. So I think he's probably got a lot of people now that will like his sort of character. I think this movie really does portray that really well. I think overall it's done very well, especially compared to Godzilla in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I do think that as they're lending that gravitas, that kind of emotionality to Godzilla, they're doing the same thing with Kong, and that's doing the series. I mean, just a great service. You're making these characters and not just caricatures of like an idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well done. Well done to the director.
All right, I think we covered what we wanted to cover.
Yep.
We'll look forward to future monster films in the next and coming episodes. Yep. Where can we find you guys on the internet if someone wants to contact you?
Matt, you go first.
Well, I'm all about Twitter, really. So my handle's at Ninja Badger 7, the number 7. So I'm the only one there, the only Ninja Badger around that counts. So that's where you can get me.
Yeah. I'm also on Twitter. I'm at Knight_Twitten. That's a Knight without a K. Hit me up. I'm not going to put my email out for all the internet, but yeah, no, if you've got any questions or comments, feel free.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you can find me at Sentient_Plus on Twitter, and the podcast itself on Twitter at mon_demonster. We would love to hear comments, questions, constructive criticism. That would be great. And we'll look forward to providing similar content in the future. With that, have a great day, listeners, and tune in next time for Monster Dear Monster.